I just want to say that, Stuart, your thing seems to have gone almost perfect, which is very good. And so, yeah, so you, yes, that's, and it's working on speed here. And so you need to, you're going to be interviewed for your PhD next Thursday. Okay, so that means you have to get your application. Okay, can you do that like sooner rather than later?
Yeah, who do I give that to?
You sent it, I think you sent it to Yan Yan. What did?
Mine all went to Yan Yan.
Yeah, go see
Yeah.
Yan Yan.
Send, if you can send my Johnny or Henry or whoever,
Yeah.
one to Yan Yan and keep a copy for yourself.
Do you have the actual application thing?
Not a physical one.
It's
oh,
the-
sorry, the internal.
Is that the university one?
A spiritual one.
You can find it online.
You
Yes.
can get them online on
Yeah,
the
no, I
research
filled
website.
yeah, I've got the BCU one. And
Yeah.
that's what's filled in. I've sent you.
Yeah, and you can have images with that too if you
Yeah,
want.
and I've put some. Yeah.
Have you, so you've done all that?
Yeah.
Have you sent it in?
No, I've sent it to you and to Henry to say.
Oh, I see, right.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
1,743 samples
Yes,
today.
yeah. That's more than it's not gone up too much. It's just.
I know. Thanks. That's because I've deleted many. Okay, and there's a couple other of you guys that need to also do this, and Sophie's one of them, so if anybody sees them. Yeah, most of them.
Sorry, Jen, do you have Yan Yan?
Oh, yeah, YAN dot Wang. Someone you will learn to know who she is on many levels. Yan Yan Wang. Yan Yan dot Wang. At BCU. Yeah.
I see, sorry, yeah, I see.
Okay. The other thing is that actually, do you mind just telling John that we're in here? So we can run upstairs. He's in his office, just if you don't mind pop. He may not come, but just so he doesn't go wandering around. Let's just, Happy New Year. What I'd like to do today, other than say it so many times, is to get a sense of how we're going to plot out the whole of the next 4 months and have different views on the matter. The second thing is that I wanted, in lieu of this, Mattia has prepared a little bit to get the ball rolling.
Oh, did I?
You agreed to this?
Yes.
Okay, with your arm firmly tied. But before we do that, I just wanted to make a suggestion or see what you think about it. This has to do with this alchemy thing. There's a group called the Student Assessment Partnership, whatever it's called, and a bunch of people applied for funding, and some got funded. And one of those people that got funded was a guy named Ed McKeon. And Ed McKeon is running a project that he's calling, is it Dialogues? Yeah, Dialogues. Anyway, and it's got several parts to it, but the part that may be of interest to you is that he's got £2,500 that he wants to spend on student-initiated projects. So I thought that what might be an interesting initiation of a project, just to see if you thought it was a good idea, is that I think that it would be wonderful to have a conference on magic and alchemy. And I mean, I heard that you would be willing to be sawn in half, which is like fantastic as an opening. So I just think that it would be very interesting to, is he coming?
He's not in his office.
Oh, he's probably upstairs waiting for me. But that it would be kind of interesting to put out a call and then have the third volume of the thesis be on alchemy and magic. And basically have it set up in a way that would rethink the foundations of art, philosophy, and science. So that's why I wanted to get back to our roots, as it were. Any suggestions about that, or do you think it's good? What were you going to say, yeah, because you were technically the organizer of this?
Ed knows about the idea. He does like the idea of doing a conference. He did contact me with the name of a performing group that would be, that as far as I know, could do something performance-based for the conference, which I think would be quite interesting to involve with the not just to do conference, but actually do a conference slash with exhibition.
Oh, absolutely,
with
yeah.
performance to it. Because
Let's make it an interesting
as
conference.
as a kind of dialogues initiative, it's supposed to connect all the aspects from BCU creative parts as a collaborative product. It might also, what I had is he's looking at the spaces, where else it can happen, not just at the BCU. So we're looking at the.
You mean not just the school?
No, not just the building.
Oh yeah,
so
right, yeah.
There is few spaces that he posted on Facebook. There's a Facebook group, Dialogues. So have a look there. Maybe some of the people also who other students who are also working on that project posted the information there. So maybe contact with them as well to get them involved in that. Yeah. So I'm not sure. It's $2.5 grand. So it's a lot of money, but it's going to be split between all the groups. So how many groups there's going to be forming, and we won't know that till 28th of January. We have the first kind of official meeting for the Dialogues project, which then the kind of all first projects from all the people involved will be coming up, including the Alchemy and Magic conference, and well, we're going to.
Well, what I was going to say, one way to do that is to have a meeting beforehand, obviously, and come up with a plan. And basically, it seems to me, so as not to be greedy, to ask for no more than half of that, something like that. So, or no more than, let's say, £2,000, because this would be something that other groups could join, and it would be a kind of an interesting thing. And
more people get involved in that, the bigger it gets.
See, that's the thing.
Kind of, if we get involved more, if the people even working on the smaller projects, we still can like kind of grab them and include them into that somehow, and then that becomes basically one big project instead of having 20 different smaller events that don't have really big impact. And this one could have a big impact, especially that that's happening in the, like under the BCU wing.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, on 28th we have a meeting with Ed to bring forward the proposals, not proposals, the kind of ideas for the projects. And yeah, we're going to be going from there.
Is it possible that people would be willing to meet, let's say, the week before, just to hammer out some sort of basic ideas? Like, let's say we use bank, and let's say, we have, I think, to set it up as a circus as opposed to as a conference or something like that, like have a very different structure, and yet at the same time have everything at the level of peer review, so we can count this all for the thesis, because otherwise it couldn't go into the journal. And would you be wanting or willing or able to organize that the week before?
Yeah, we can try to put date in.
I think that's a good idea, just to kind
I'm
of.
not sure when I'm working next week. That's the problem.
Are you working next week?
I'm working all the weeks. Excellent. But that's fine. I'll sort it. But if it's on 20th, Tuesday, so how about if it's Wednesday? So we have those meetings on Wednesdays. I'm usually off.
Oh, right, okay. So,
so if it next week we have
Wednesday.
a meeting before the 22nd, before the seminar.
PhD, yeah, that's a great idea.
So we can even, if you're busy, then we can have it in PhD.
Yeah, but otherwise you can have it here. Let's see if
Yeah.
I can.
So let's just put now. I'm gonna email you guys with if I have more. 22nd February. Yeah. Oh, January. 2000.
Okay, you're scaring me now. That's right, 2011, great. Okay.
I'm 12.
And yeah. Okay, so we can have that meeting on 22nd, and maybe if anybody can, before that meeting, think, it doesn't have to be very like grounded idea, but something to put into it. I mean, something, how do you imagine having a circus conference?
That'd be great. Should we meet at 1?
1 o'clock?
Because that way you can take a break afterwards.
Yeah, and then
For at least a few minutes. I'm really excited about you being sawn in half. I mean, and then I mentioned that this was a possibility at the meeting we just had, and they were arguing that there should be someone that it would work on, that they didn't like. We will remain unnamed who that person is. Anyway, that's exciting. I think that's exciting because I can see different kinds of sculptures that come out of that, different walls. We might be able to use the Library of Birmingham for their new, they have this new image wall. I don't know really what it's about, but it just sounds like something we should play with. You know, in fact, you should play with it.
Okay.
Yeah. Seriously, it's like it looks like a very fun way to start re-showing one's work, you know, on a very large scale. Okay, so any questions on that? Good. I don't know how long we can go. Right. So the next thing is to really think about what is happening. Let me just say to the people that applied for the HRC, it looks like, oh, you're already in, you need to be in, you're already in. It's not obviously official, but at the moment, everyone that's in this room seems to have made it through the first loop, which is, you know, now it's very heavy competition, and they probably will only give us, they keep saying they're gonna give only one to the entire university. I was like, why not? Why not give more? So I have a bet going with some of the upper management that if we get 10 is what I asked for, that I get a bottle of champagne, which I'll share with everybody. But I will keep everybody posted. Those that are in the PhD program already don't have to be interviewed. Those that are not have to be interviewed next Thursday. So that's the story there. Any questions on that? And then once that happens, then this, that's a long short list that's been set up. Then a short list is set up. And that short list goes to the bigger consortium in the sky, which is the 6 universities. They have 4 panels. I'm sitting on one of the panels. I'm sitting on the panel for us. I am completely non-judgmental. I cannot be bought off, none of those things. But I happen to know that we happen to have excellent people from this group applying. So if everyone gets it, what can you do? I mean, it would be sad, but someone's got to get it. Might as well be us, you know. That's my feeling. The other thing is that for those of you that would like to do teaching, and at the moment not get paid for it, so see it as part of, I don't know, your life learning as a, without getting exploited. This is the key here. I mean, that kind of was like, but if you do want some training on some level, there are people at the moment that are desperate to have you help them out. Let me know. So people in curating, people at any level, MA, BA, and so on. They've cut a lot of the funds. I'm gonna have a big meeting next week, or the week thereafter, depending on tomorrow's meeting, about what's left in the research budget, which at the moment is minute. It's kind of amazing. And we've got to make a decision as to how to use that money. And I'm open to use it for conferences, this is a thesis, paying you guys to do, research. I don't know, we've only got we've got 8,000, well actually we've got 6,000 pounds for the entire year, which is unbelievable, because we used to have 80,000, so to give you an idea. It's just a little bit smaller this year. So that's, everyone's a little bit surprised. It came down over the weekend. I'm going to send you all the new research strategy document, so if you're having a hard time falling asleep at night, this will help you. Mm-hmm. You can just look through it and just nod off quietly. Anybody want to do teaching with that kind of idea in mind? I know you already signed up for this.
Yes, I think, but they never come back to me. Probably next week something will happen.
Well, your name was put forward many, many times as the exemplar of somebody, you and Grace, because you're teaching as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you getting paid for that?
I was paid for last time, but no.
Yeah. Cool. Would you? Okay, good. Okay.
Henry suggested that I could do some workshop-based teaching.
Great. I mean, would you want to do BA or MA?
Probably BA.
Yeah, great.
For what I, can
If that's the
contribute.
case, and did Henry have in mind what he thought you should do? Otherwise, you talk to John Wigley.
Yeah, I will talk to Henry then, Joe. Try
Because
to
I can
figure
put
out what
names
I
for it,
can do.
anybody who wants to be involved, I can put more names for it. And if you want to teach on the MA, that's also possible.
Also, there is one thing, sorry, I don't know if you got the email from BCU entrepreneurs, I'm mentioning that again. They have £5,000 to give for business proposal, business plan, some sort of that will have a social impact.
Oh yeah, I saw that, yeah.
I don't understand that well, but I kind of thought to myself straight away about article press and using that if any students get involved in that much more as in
That's a
making
great idea.
bigger business out of it. An article, maybe the same article gallery. I know Hannah Hanwell, she's working on getting another space for article gallery, basically as an for this university to use. There's a basement in the bar. They want to be the Ubu bar that was sponsored
Oh,
the
that's
show.
great.
And they have a basement that they want to show video works, and they want to be involved in the university life as well as a part of it. So that might be some sort of external video projector space. But it's always something. And I thought if we think about writing a proposal, actual business proposal to these people at BCU who have £5,000, it could really work, especially that there's lots of business-like opportunities within this area.
Well, that's a
Article
brilliant
press,
idea. I
article
mean, if
gallery.
anybody wants to, there's a person, Annika French.
I'm not the
who's-
best at writing those things, so that's why I'm trying.
So there's a person named Annika French who's in the MA, and she's been placed to work at Article Press. She could probably help on this, to do that, Annika, A-N-N-E-K-A, French. And also Zatisas, every journal of Zatisas costs about £5,000 to produce. So if we sell like half of it, we get our money back, but we haven't even managed to do that. But that's because we have to get it distributed, and that I haven't finished doing yet. So Mattia and I are working on the distribution. So hopefully we'll get that, but it would be great. I think we should come up with T-shirts. I'm sorry, some very American here. T-shirts, football helmets, and I thought what we call them, caps. Yeah.
Oh, one of the commercials, I wouldn't buy it. Best place to work.
Actually, we could make a nun first as a proper art piece.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Kickstarter video.
That's the
That's
Kickstarter
video.
Let's go Kickstarter.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. Okay. Now let's begin the course. We have between now and the end of March, 10 weeks. Then there's somewhere there's a break. I think it's at the end of March for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then we resume. Now what I have done in the past is have the PhD seminar that goes all the way to the end of May. I'm happy to continue doing that. Do you want to do that? Yes? Yes? Okay. Very quiet. Okay, so if that's the case, then we have about 15 to 20 weeks to work with. Now, we did come up with a couple of ideas before we closed the seminar in December. I want to rethink those ideas because I want to make sure, I mean, we're obviously a very pared down group at the moment. I don't know where the rest of our people are. I know there's been a lot of meetings and meetings upon meetings that happened the last 2 weeks, but we need to really think through what would be the best thing for your work at a kind of visceral level that will also give you tools to think. One solution, Mattia and I were like trying to work this out earlier today because his tutorial got hijacked with thinking about this group. That's not quite true. He did talk for about an hour and a half before it got hijacked. But anyway, but then it got hijacked. One idea was to do the classics. And I'm not suggesting that this is a good idea. I'm just saying this is an idea. It turns out that a lot of people really don't know critique of judgment, don't get, pure reason, practical reason, don't understand why it's even important. So we look at Kant. We really do a heavy Kant moment. And then parallel to that, we can look at analytic of sublime or any of the other Kantian moments that get thrown into the mix. That's one approach. Another approach was that we start thinking about what it is to talk about the senses, looking at this relationship between complexity on the one hand and the question of intuition, feelings, this kind of thing. That will be a kind of sideways move into Kant, but it would also then develop it in various ways. We look at Prigione, we could look at what's her name? Your person, the corrosive architecture. Parisi, Luciana Parisi. We could do speculative realism. I mean, there's a number of things. Then we could also do concepts, like we could do the concept of time. We could do the concept of the spirit. You know, really honestly, we could do we could just do Grace's PhD on supernatural. We just have the entire thing on this, or what it is to be hidden. These are things what is the sexual? The other suggestion I had was I think that a lot of people really haven't understood Foucault. It's something that wouldn't be such a tragedy to go back and look at, particularly his Truth of Courage book, which gets into whole questions of parrhesia and zetesis, and this notion of very specific kinds of ethics and aesthetics, and makes an argument around the relation between aesthetics and epistemology and method and sexuality. So that's another way in, or something else altogether, which I haven't thought of, or Mattia hasn't thought of. So, with that in mind, Lee, what were you thinking of? What would make you want to come to this, other than me hitting you on the head and saying come?
For me personally, I guess going first of all, going through the classics would be a very useful thing for me. I would say, because I haven't read a lot for a while, and it'd be good to go back to. And also, but interspersed with maybe just weeks of just taking on a subject and exploring it really.
Interesting. Oliver, what about you? What do you think? What do you think? Yeah.
For me, it would be useful to know the classics better.
No kidding.
No, yeah, because
That's fascinating to me. The reason I say this is when I was at the Yamvanite, I did the classics, and there was practically a revolt on the, I mean, this one guy threw down the stuff. I came to study with you. You were supposed to be radical. Why are you looking at, Kant? And I was like, because I'm really not radical. It's like, what am I going to say? I'm a really horrible person. Okay, interesting. Mark?
Yeah,
Well, that's the
I
thing.
go with the flow. I go with the classics.
Yeah, well, when I said the classics, I mean Kant.
Does that include Nietzsche?
What's that?
Does that include Nietzsche?
Yeah, Kant, Leibniz, Spinoza, Nietzsche, basically. The classics. I mean, so you really get a sense of how it fits in. Breaking with the flow.
I'm still rather interested in trying to build a bridge between philosophy and quantum physics. So, I mean, I've been looking at relationships between Spinoza, Einstein, Gödel, Leibniz, and being able to develop that.
So if we looked at the concept of time, and looked at it with let's say Hawkins' history, it started out with something light, so we get our feet wet, and then went into bundles of light, so we get into quanta and how the bundles operate. You would like that? Okay.
We'll do it.
I'm happy with either of those.
Grace?
I like concepts as well. I think I find it.
That's hilarious. I love this class. I love you. I knew there's a reason I love being here. Yes, go on.
Because if you've got a concept, a wider concept, then it's easy for people to bring their own ideas to that instead of it being specific text. Because I mean, I'd love to do the classics as well because I have no grounding in them, but I find it more interesting if I can angle my own point of view if we're talking about the idea of time or the idea of the supernatural.
For example,
Make it work for you.
Or hidden, even that would be good.
I think that you have to start showing some of your hidden mother pictures. Those
Well,
are
my website's back up now, so
Is it?
everyone's free to view.
It's just great. I mean, the whole hidden things that you've been doing. Okay.
Being right at the beginning, I'm tempted to go with classics, just to get me back up to speed again. But I like
Having
the idea
said
of
that-
concepts as well, and
Okay.
just breaking it down a little bit and looking at different things like time and stuff like that, and how that might fit into what I want to do.
Okay.
But I'm still angling at classics, I think.
Okay. Which Spinoza?
expressionism this week, so I thought I'd be reading that and reading some Spinoza about recital plants, and then I thought about that to read some Leibniz at the same time. And there's lots of things I'm trying to read at the same time, really, but they don't necessarily connect. Sort of strategic way. And of course I've put the Rancian.
Oh, that was
How do you say that one?
Iaphasis.
Sorry?
Iaphasis.
Yeah.
It's unpronounceable.
Iaphasis.
I want
Sounds
to
like you have a
read
pain in your neck.
Well, I have got some budget books that we'll just read, and well, I will read it, but the Heidegger of the event one, which I just haven't managed to get into yet, but I'll to be reading that. And Stenger's Cosmopolitics. I wanted to read some more of the David Byrne, the one with the implicate order or something.
The what?
Implicate order or something. BOHM. Quantum.
Bohr.
science.
B-O-H-R.
Yeah, there's a there's a BOHR, Niels Bohr.
Yeah.
He's probably like to read some of his stuff. No, it's the other one, a different one.
B-O-H-M.
BOHM. What am I reading this group will be? Oh, I was like, I'd like to read some of that Jean-Paul Montimon's work.
Oh yeah, he's very good. Yeah, we can get him to speak as well.
I mean, I'll just sort of, oh, and I suppose and also still sort of really continuing with like Leotard's work really more in depth in this analytic supply and returning. I still sort of really concentrating quite a bit on that, or Leotard's work on the supply and sort of other essays. Heidegger and the Jews sort of returning to that, but so really the Kant, the move that he's making from Kant is still so working out. So in terms of this classics idea, for me, looking more at the other, I've only really looked at the critique of judgment, so to look at the other ones would probably be good.
Okay. Good. All right. Stuart? No, that's good.
Sitting on three fences.
Okay, what concept or classics?
No, I mean the classics would be good, particularly Kant and Leibniz. I think would be useful. And again, like has previously been said, lack of knowledge, lack of grounding in that. The second one you said, I think, as well, was it sensation and but equally,
What? Sexuality.
yeah, but particularly yeah, there was another word in there, I can't think of it.
Parisia. Parisia. What?
Complexity.
Complexity.
Complexity, yeah.
That wasn't the word.
Was that not?
No, it might have been.
Right.
You're still with us.
And then concept type the time thing I think would be very useful. So
Okay. Yes, no. Go on.
From what, like, we were working on ground basically.
Yes.
First term, and I was working on a concept and how it kind of played
Okay.
with the seminars. So everybody brought something in from whatever their research were coming from, and I would like to continue with that.
Okay, so
of
that method. So
that way of
so
exploring.
but
So
not
it'd be
groundless grounds.
Not groundless ground, and other things that will come in and basically, and I think that's what Grace mentioned, it allows everybody to find their own angle into the topic and their own way into it.
And what would be yours?
Well, and that's
Palimpsest.
the second
That's right.
No, my second
Just
thing, that's
kidding.
why I want to go into hidden.
Hidden.
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, hidden and yeah, hidden, the dark and twisted hidden.
Dark and twisted hidden. How's it go? It was a dark and rainy night. The something was the lights were dim. We heard a splash. We heard a crash. My God, she's fallen in. When you heard this, I can't remember the whole thing.
That, but
That's my life. Anyway.
that's okay.
All right.
There we go.
Well, any of it sounds really interesting. So that's
Poor Townsend. She's just an interloper at the moment, but that's okay.
way out of my depth. But the stuff about the sublime sounds interesting, and the hidden sounds interesting, and time.
By the way, there's a new book out on water. Have you seen this? It's all on the way in which water folds and creases and so on. I'll get you the link. Okay, there's water, for example.
Is that
Yes.
Oh,
What's the title of it?
I think it might have H2O in it.
No, it is something like the fundamentals. It's really.
I want to read that as well.
Yeah, it looks like a very
Yeah,
interesting
I think
book.
it's a really good.
Although you'd want to slice your wrist at the middle of it because it's just so depressing about how the military is causing the whales to beach themselves and, like, it's after a while. Anyway, sorry.
Who's the author? It's M-A-E and then W-A-N and then H-O is its
M-A-E-W-E-N.
W-A-N. Main line of quote. Or I can send you a link because it reminded me. But that looks with the quantum stuff, water stuff.
Let me just find it for you. This thing. Okay. I don't know if it's made with or not, actually. It's a different one. I'll have to get you the one I'm thinking about. Okay, Mattia, what would you like to see?
I am firstly in tune with today because we are studying very similar things, the relation between physics and the philosophical concept of time.
Okay.
And I think it could be tackled as main subject being time, and then everyone plugs in. But we still have to choose some specific text.
No, that we can do that. We just got to get through the first hurdle here. Sophie, what about yourself? What we've been doing is going around the table, thinking about. We basically have about 15, maximum 20 weeks for the seminar, from now to the end of May, with a break for I don't know, lunch. Would you prefer to read the classics? So Kant, Leibniz, Spinoza, Nietzsche. Would you rather have a concept that drives it like we were doing with Groundless Ground?
Concept.
Okay. So,
Thanks, Dave.
got a kick, did you?
No, I got a thumbs up.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So, if we did something like, how about we did the concept of alchemy, and in it we thought about transformation, and we thought about change, hidden, corrosiveness, Breaking Bad. Has anybody seen this? Thank you. Okay, I just want to say, as a homework assignment, you have to see the first 4 seasons. That's all you have to see. You don't really have to see season 5.
I've not seen season 5 yet.
See?
I've seen all 4 of the other ones, but
Yeah.
I don't really want to watch the last one.
No,
Some of
exactly.
I don't want it to end, really. I don't want to hit the conclusion.
It's a real Shakespearean.
Yeah.
It is Shakespeare
Yeah.
in comic, but it is fantastic. The reason I'm mentioning it though is because it's all about the periodic table. Well, it's not really all about that. It's all about meth and drugs, rock and roll. But I recommend it. And if you go to Netflix, Netflix, it's all on there. So just watch it.
I watched the whole series.
You did.
Yes, I know the end.
You know that.
Spoiler.
You are not allowed to say anything.
Amazing.
Plots.
The end is amazing, is it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
You went all the way to season 5.
Yes.
Oh, and you have the end of season 5.
Yes, I have the end.
That's like having a PhD already.
Yeah, and all I can tell you is that season 5, because they were going to actually end it at season 4, but there was an outcry because people wanted to have more, because it is such an amazing story. The acting, the directing, the whole thing, it is really Shakespeare at its finest contemporary moment. The season 5 was actually done in 2 seasons. There's 5A and 5B. and you know this? Anyway, 5A and 5B. So you could actually watch them in parallel with two screens, okay? Or you could just watch them as a length. Yeah, just, are we all right?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay, so do we have a, what are we going to do here? Concept?
Does the truth go in
Yes.
Of course. Yes.
There's several tablets.
Are you okay about alchemy? Would alchemy make sense?
Yeah, alchemy's cool.
Okay, if we're going to do alchemy, then we have to do the periodic table. So you have to see Breaking Bad, seasons 1 through 4, minimally, and you have to do that before next week. Believe me,
It's gonna be easy.
it's going to be easy. Yeah, it's like watching a big novel. It is so fabulous. It's just hard to put down. It's addictive. It really is. I actually had to add bolt-ons to my thing, so because I kept running through data to watch this. It's
That's
great.
like watching The Killing or something like that. Yeah,
No,
I'm totally obsessed.
this is
No, they're
The
good.
Killing up to 90,000. It's okay. So if we're going to do that, and we're going to do alchemy, I think the first reading has got to be Kant. I think that the idea will be, I will find the proper book for alchemy, or we can move it into any one of the other things. What book would you like to start off with?
I'm interested in subjectivity and reality.
Okay, so
I know.
you're in the wrong class. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's, I'm just trying to think. Let's start with two books. One by, one called The Periodic Table by, yeah, not Levi Strauss, but Primo Levi.
Primo Levi.
Thank you. Primo Levi. The Periodic Table, that's a novel which you can read alongside watching Breaking Bad. It's an amazing novel, but it's basically about Auschwitz, and what I really want you to look at is actually the periodic table. Do you know what the periodic table is?
Yeah.
Learn the chemicals.
Okay.
Learn the chemicals. Pick a chemical and decide which chemical. Hello, and decide which chemical is your chemical. Came in at the wrong time. It does sound wrong here. But pick a chemical and decide which one you want to be for the duration of till the end of May. Which chemical you feel most comfortable with being. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that since everybody did say that they wanted to do the classics, well, everybody on this side wanted to do the classics, I'm just thinking that, see, the thing about alchemy is that it's about corrosiveness and change in a very specific way. So, in fact, we could link it to possibly the question of time. I have to think about this. Let's say for next week we do Primo Levi and the periodic table, and we combine it with, because I think we'll need some sort of central feature. In Leibniz, there's a question of how things change. What would be? I'm thinking of Gregory Chaitin's work on Leibniz, but Leibniz
no, it's
himself.
not there. The introduction to the new essays, which we have in the Dropbox, speaks of infinitesimal subdivision of matter.
Okay, that's what we need to look at. Yeah.
That would be one bit.
So what's the title?
The new essays. We have the book in the Dropbox, and then
Clayton.
no,
No, by Leibniz.
And then there is
Leibniz.
there is more on in the discourse of metaphysics, where he speaks about imperceptible becoming, which leads straight into the notion of becoming.
Okay, we're not going to go to Deleuze at the moment. We'll
But Leibniz,
look at
yeah.
Leibniz's infinitesimal,
What's the title of the book? Is that the chapter?
The first one is the introduction to the new essays of Leibniz.
Oh, right.
And then the other, because Leibniz wrote a bit everywhere and published only one thing, and then the other one is the discourse on metaphysics, of which some sections, which I can find at the end of the seminar, discuss infinitesimal subdivision of matter, and therefore infinitesimal becoming, because passing from one entity to another doesn't happen as a clear cut, but in various small bits simultaneously.
So basically, in short, the hip version of the title of this group will be Alchemy, or The Alchemist. That's what it can be. The boring version, or the more, let's say, hardcore side of it, it's not very boring, is going to be looking at the way in which matter gets established. So this whole question of what's the matter with matter. So matter could be senses, matter could be thoughts, matter could be objectivity. There's a very interesting book on the question of the object in, which is not the subject, but at least it's playing around with these kind of things, in Dropbox, and it's called, I think it's called On Objectivity. It's by this woman whose name I've repressed. It's a very interesting, very technical book on looking at objectivity.
Lorraine's.
Yeah, that's it. It's Lorraine something. That's right. By the way, thank
Lorraine
you for
something.
Lorraine something.
Lorraine Dalston.
That's it, Lorraine Dalston. Yeah.
What's it called?
Objectivity.
What's interesting about that? What's interesting about that particular book are the pictures in it. The pictures get into this question of a very specific way in which maps were done. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll come back.
Very specific way of mapping, which in the Jamaican sort of cultural side move here, it wasn't really mapping, but it was categorizing herbs, particularly herbs that would be deadly herbs that could, and there are different ways of showing them like a periodic table, except this is like the plant categorizations. And she gets into how that looks, the looking of the matter of doing these categories is really very beautiful. There's also there's a woman named Jocelyn Gardner, Jocelyn, Joscelyn, Gardner, like gardening, Gardner. She's a very interesting artist who also deals with this kind of mapping look of matter once you've got it like a periodic table. And she does do, her work is on, she's from the Caribbean, she's from Barbados, her work is on the way in which these categories of basically drugs that were used either to harm people that were enslaved or used by people who were enslaved to harm masters and so on and so forth. So there's a very interesting mapping book that she does. It was brought out by the V&A, her work. And if you can take a look at her work for that. So in short, next week, take a look at Primo Levi's periodic table. And in fact, the periodic table, and pick an element. And also think to yourself around the difference between why call it an element and not an atom, for example? What is it about an element? What is it? Why call it matter? What's the matter with this? Okay, and as alchemist, can you change, crappy metal into gold? Why not, in a certain sense? They couldn't do it in the 18th and 17th century. What was the obsession with that anyway? So Primo Levi, I would then suggest Leibniz. Can can you make sure that the 2 readings for Leibniz will be on?
The one,
The infinitesimal.
the new essays is in Dropbox. The other one is not online.
What was
The,
there?
well, no, sorry. The introduction on the history of metaphysics is also in the Dropbox.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, they're both.
So they're both online, yeah. So introduction.
It's not this book, but it's the discourse on metaphysics.
Yeah,
And,
but that's the discourse in metaphysics. That might help us. And then what else was the third one apart from Breaking Bad?
Objectivity.
Oh yeah, that's it. Just look at the pictures. Objectivity by Dalston and Jolsling. Now, so what we'll basically do in the next 2 weeks is use Leibniz as our kind of jumping point in order to think about the way in which this notion of division happens in matter. And then also how matter creates matter. Like, what is it about matter? Is that going to be interesting? You interested?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Sorry, am I looking fine?
Yeah.
No, I've just been doing a workshop. It was very good. Exactly. So this is sort of
Good.
yes.
Excellent.
Sorry, I will focus. Yes, very interesting.
Thrilling, in fact.
Yeah,
Right.
exciting. Do you know, my chemistry teacher, I always remember, taught us how to remember how the periodic table goes. Because she said, and it was a really good analogy, that it's like when you get on the bus and you don't want to sit next to somebody, that they always fill up all the spaces all the way around and then you go to the next one. I didn't even know
And that's how you remember the periodic table?
Well, that's one way of
But how do you remember what is in the periodic table?
Oh no, that's just how it's constructed.
Oh, I see.
It's, but it's
Right.
quite
That's
useful.
good. What metal would you be?
So bad.
Copper.
You'd be copper.
Yeah, definitely copper.
Okay, so whatever else people are going to be, you can't be copper.
Oh no, should I show you what I got today? I'm so excited. There's my that's the curve. But look at this. I went to Maplin, so I spent ages and ages. How gorgeous is this? That's copper. Red copper. Huh?
Excellent, okay. Now, okay, so in the context of this, the concepts that we'll play around with, one will be matter, transformation. Right.
I might have something to say, so.
Let's see. Let's see. The time will clearly be involved in this. Time and temporo-spatio moves. Temporal, spatio, or spatio-temporal moves. I think that this will bring us into the question of epistemology, linked to taste. So we'll get to some Kant. I would recommend, before the end of this semester, or whenever we end, really you should have some Kant, particularly the Critique of Judgment, under your belt. And we can do all 3 volumes, Critique of Judgment, the Critique of Pure Reason, and the Critique of Practical Reason. But I think that that would be helpful. I think that Wittgenstein could play in this. You were thinking about philosophic grammar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Luciana Parese's work, and maybe The Courage of Truth by Foucault, and the other one, Society Must Be Defended. There's also The Use of Pleasure that's always a fun one.
What was the last one?
The Use of Pleasure, volume 5, I think, of the History of Sexuality. Or maybe it's volume 4. Okay, shall we begin again? begin our next form of beginning. Are you ready to say something about your work?
Just a second.
Oh, sorry. We can just go around and say our work. Would that make you feel better?
Well, it's all right. I mean, I can.
Does everyone feel compelled about being quiet about their work? Or do you want to speak about where you are in your work? We'll just do it really quickly. Where are you in your work? That was quick. Okay, seriously.
No, I'm actually looking at the emerald tablets in Alchemy.
In emerald tablets?
Emerald tablets, or
like
tablets of Hermes. Hermes they were called in Alchemy. I mean like actual alchemy, like the old.
So you've been holding back. So here we are talking about alchemy the whole time, completely quiet. You're working on this.
Well, I wasn't really working on it. It just came after my proposal came to life, and kind of, well, let's have a look. So I came across the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, and it's hilarious because I have like 20 translations of that tablet, and they are all then translated into English.
Okay, should we also look at that next week?
I don't think the actual content is necessarily important.
Just the tablet.
Because this is like there's 15 points on the tablet, so that's
okay.
what and they're supposed to be telling the truth, whatever
okay.
that is. But you can find online basically translations of that, of translations. So it's been translated through many cultures, through many people, and then it's been translated into English, and each of them varies from each other. And they create very interesting, I think that's very funny and interesting, especially that I'm looking into translation.
Right.
Pure language, achieving the pure language, and that kind of does it. It only speaks truth without actually saying truth.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking into, and yeah, so that's the alchemy for me right now.
Good, interesting. Okay.
Apparently I've applied for a PhD. I've got an interview.
That's how I felt. I felt months ago.
Which the title at the moment is Romancing the British Landscape. And British Landscape has a hashtag before it, and it's an investigation of the 21st century aesthetics of sensing via digital transformation.
See, this is how y'all start out. You see how he's saying it all in one sentence? like it's the entire thesis is in one sentence.
No, I've said it like there's a hashtag right at this, and there's no space.
That's right. That's exactly right. You know, that's great. That's great. Welcome to the club.
And sort of, can I do it very quickly? So there's a starting out point. It's kind of bookended. There's Turner apocryphally having himself tied to the mast of a ship so he can experience a storm at sea around the start of the 1800s, and then you get to 2012, and there's a company called Big Robot who came up with the British Landscape Generator, which it basically creates a game space. I've forgotten the name of the game, but it's kind of shooting.
Capitalism.
Yeah, sponsored by Conservative. Actually, funnily enough, it is about sort of it's about guys in their country clothing. So that's as mentioned earlier, the tweeds going around.
Not to point to anybody.
But essentially moving
Don't
through
feel badly.
realistic British landscapes as such thing, as a game space.
So.
And then, so really what I'm trying to do is collide romantic perspective of British landscape with what's happening to society through within the digital age. But equally, I'm trying to bring into it the ecosophy of Arne Naess, who I think he died in the 90s, but he was a Norwegian philosopher, and he basically put ecology and philosophy together. So it's kind of coming through in new nature writing, particularly. It's particularly, obviously literature at the moment. That's much else to do with that.
I mean, one of the things that I was asked about your proposal today, one of the many things I was saying, And one of the things I added, which may or may not be true now, was that, but in case you get quizzed on this, you may need to realize what it is. No, sorry. Which is that I thought that you were looking at Constable and Turner because they, I mean, as a kind of shorthand, were able to give a very specific way of viewing nature by the way in which they use light and oil and framing of landscape, this kind of romantic sense of the picturesque.
Yeah.
And what you're suggesting by moving with this other bookend is that the digital transformation, to the degree to which there are artists now that are working in that field, are also able to give a kind of way of seeing nature. They're able to give like a thumbprint on it, or to give some kind of a handle on it.
There was certainly something different, and they came in really at the tail end of what is sort of seen as the Romantic period, which supposedly ended with the coronation of Queen Victoria, very neatly. But yeah, they were doing something different. It was moving away from that pure representation.
But you're stealing the romantic era, as it were, and going to sort of re-embed it through a digital sort of platform.
And there's a sort of touchstone of the neo-romantics in the middle of the 20th century as well, which I want to sort of keep hold of as well. So what they did to classical romanticism, so it sort of has a pedigree as well, I suppose.
Yeah. Good.
I'm not very connected to
This is Lauren, by the way. That's Stuart.
Yes.
Jakob. Yeah, and we'll get to you. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, over the Christmas break, I've been before the Christmas break, I did have a bit of focus time, so I was trying to sort of really just focus on that sort of the sublime and the sublime, sort of reading across that bit of area, and the characters going over that. After Christmas, I read a couple of essays, and then I went back to the analytic of the sublime. But I've had to break doing something else, and I can't really talk about my work today, so I can't manage to be registered back into it properly.
Okay, well that's what we have today.
But I did progress over the thing, but it's just, I can't quite get back.
You're a Leninist. You know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's Lenin. Did you know that?
I think more like 5 steps back.
That's right. Well, then we don't progress. So we have to think of progression.
Oh, but we have to make success and not failure.
That's true. That's true. Mistake. Yes. That's just a quiet joke. Okay, Gay. This is Gay.
Okay, yes. I've changed my names a few times. It's confused a few people, but I'm at Gay Place at the moment, which is, I'm going to stay at that one for a little bit. I think it was quite important to get to that point. So then I could apply for a PhD, which I've just done and been accepted, so I've just put an offer in. But it's also practice-based, and I'm obviously interested in identity and materiality and representations of the body and how that sort of thing all works. And that's about where I am at the beginning. Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you remember long ago how wonderful it was, everything before you? Yeah, great.
So that's sort of who I am and where I'm at.
Great. Welcome. That's great.
I've been very busy, first of all. It's been doing
This
lots
is
of different,
Jacqueline.
lots
No
of
one has
different
names
things.
today.
But I've been sort of thinking about intersubjectivity and materiality, and reading Laura Marks. Talks about
Laura Marks, right.
visuality and looking at artworks that embody sort of particular materialities and how that can figure with subjectivity and that sort of thing.
Are you going to be applying for any postdocs?
In the UK, I can't find any because the AHRC have got really strange definitions of when you can apply for things. So, for example, you can't if you're in if for the AHRC to apply for anything, you can't. You're only at ECR if you've got a contract at an institution and you've finished your PhD for a certain amount of time. You can only apply for a postdoc if you've finished 2 years ago. They've got really weird sort of rules to apply for things. So I'm looking for things, but it's very difficult.
Huh. Okay, we'll keep an eye peeled for you. Okay, thank you.
I'm Grace. And at the moment I've been working on a series that's called Hidden, which is based on the hidden mother photographs which I showed before. And literally kind of using ideas of early magical illusion tricks which for female vanishing. So there's a specific setup which was by Bautier de Colta in France, which was the first staging of the Vanishing Woman Act. And people probably maybe know that the roots of magic were Indian, so there was often kind of oriental kind of scars or patterned very heavily kind of appropriated items that were obviously from where Britain had just colonised. And they were brought into the trick. So I've been playing around with the use of Persian rugs as a site for vanishing, and really playing around with how pattern can flatten. That rhymes. Sorry.
Nice, I like.
Sorry.
Moment of recognition.
But how that also creates a kind of optical illusion. So it's the layering of different illusions that are happening in the image. But they're I'm also. The size of these pieces is based on Guy Jarrett, who was an illusion maker, so he made all the traditional kind of vanishing boxes, and he came up that the minimum measurements that any human can vanish in, obviously it depended on weight, but if for a standard kind of female assistant, it was 7 inches by 8 inches, and he used to do it within a doll's house, so it kind of had this domestic trapping as well. But obviously that's a really nice proportion for photography, and I'm playing around with having the images that size and not fixing the
7 inches by 8 inches. That's tiny. What's the average size that he's talking about?
I think it's 5'4".
Wow.
So yeah, but yeah, he's got images of the doll's house that they used to use, and obviously it was contortion, I'm sure. But
clearly.
Yeah. I'm not going to try and get
remove a few ribs.
They did used to do that actually, remove the lower ribs so that they could kind of get into them. But not fixing the actual image as well, so that when the photograph is exposed and it's displayed, it will gradually carry on being exposed, so it will turn to black. So there's another level of hiding an illusion that happens in that.
So there's a bit of layering with this thing.
Yeah, kind of, which has just come through experimenting kind of practically. But
we have a new PhD person who will come on amongst the ones, who is actually a tutor at Bourneville called Francesca Shank. Do you know?
Oh yes.
And Francesca is working on a different form of camouflage, where rather than being illusion, she's showing how the chameleon actually can hide in plain sight, but doesn't do it via illusion. Does it via the way in which color flattens. That's what made me think about this. And I think that's actually very interesting, because it allows one to be present in plain sight. This is the camouflage, literally the camouflage of way in which patterns and iteration of patterns start working. Oh, interesting. That's good. Okay.
I guess I'm looking at
Dane.
Oh. I am Dane. At the moment I'm looking at mostly early 19th century sculpture, and how it manages, mostly vitalistic sculpture, how it tends to try to approximate a life impulse via non-representation by using sort of an abstract language of different sort of metals and gears. It's this machinic language which allows to create a life impulse, and we look at the theories behind that. And alchemy does sort of tend into that as well.
When you say the machinic impulse, are you talking like Frankenstein or something?
Yeah, it could be that as well, yeah. It's how you put all these things together, and it's how you spark a life, and how the artwork
comes to life.
Yeah, exactly, and developing that further by using Jack Burns' idea of the aesthetics of intelligent systems, how when you go towards systems-oriented artwork, the artwork gains a sort of intelligence, and it responds in a different sort of way.
So you're going to move that from, like, say, a 19th century spark to the morphogenetic position around artificial intelligence. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to dive move slightly away from artificial intelligence. ways to do
Interesting.
it.
You should look at, what's her name, Lovelace.
Later.
Yeah, she's got some very interesting work on the way in which life starts to happen in a machine. There's a whole ton of this in the 18th century, 19th century. Shelley and all the rest of that crowd, you know, they were involved with that. But also, more recently, is someone that's just gone on my head. I'll have to come back to you on it, but it's this. Oh, I know. There's this artist called Li Li, then space E, Chen, C-H-E-N, Li E Chen, and her work is all on the aliveness that happens in theater. And if you go to her website, I'm sure it's all there. Yeah, good.
Hi, I'm Sophie.
Yes, got a name.
Like Stuart, I just applied for my PhD.
Oh, what you don't know is that your interview is on Thursday.
What?
Next
week?
Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Right.
please get your interview. Please
Okay,
get it
right,
in.
fine. Okay, so I've got an interview. I have a title. See if I can remember. Beyond Census, decoding the curve of the young female body. Then semicolon. Feminism and polymorphous performance art in the age of digital transformation. And
That is the entire thesis written in a sentence. It's kind of like your haiku. That was quite good, actually.
I actually found the process of applying painful, but it was really good because I feel like I know where I want to go now with it. With Gay, actually, I did a body cast of my daughter who's 14, and she did the pose of a Degas young dancer, age 14, which she held for 35 minutes, didn't she?
Wow.
Actually. And today, actually, I did. This is it. This is the curve, basically. Which way? I'm trying to think.
Oh dear.
Like that. So she's. So I.
Upside down.
That's her. That's like side. Your
Where's her
sideways.
head?
Your sideways on the
In this structure, where would the head be?
Head's there.
Okay.
That's her bum. So she's like curved like that. She's actually more curved, but it's more like that.
Yeah.
But I found these old motherboards because I was talking to Joe about putting.
Joe Longhurst.
Yeah, Joe Longhurst. About putting objects into it that actually mean something to it. So I was thinking that it's all about. My work's really dealing with code and communication, and one thing that I think the young people are obsessed with is instant communication all the time. So I'm putting in some motherboards, and I might put in some SIM cards as well. So I'm going to take the wire and sort of weave it in and out, so it's like a spine. So that will hold, hopefully, in latex, and then I'm going to do basically, well, I'm doing this tomorrow. And then I'm using wire to go down the sides and just to hold it.
And then you're plugging in your daughter.
No, it's sort of inspired by cyborg bodies, Haraway, and the idea of it being slightly robotic. I want to do lots of different forms, like 5-class latex, rice paper. So that they're, and then I might map. I was thinking I'm going to video onto them and map them, actually. So,
Great.
yeah, that's
Good.
where I am now.
Thank you.
I'm Mark. Musician, so music, been doing that. Artist, arts, I've been doing that. I want to say intellectual actually, but that kind of comes with party lines, puppet maybe.
Do you say puppet?
Yes, because it comes tangled by the lines. So, yeah, that's me. Anything else you want to know?
There might be more things.
Later.
Okay. I like that.
Okay, I'm Oscar. Now,
Oscar, I called you Oliver. I'm so sorry. Oscar.
It's okay.
I knew it was an O word. Sorry.
I'm interested in subjectivity and reality, and now I'm more specifically in how prestige doesn't work anymore in digital era, like museum prestige, or where to find the prestige in art now.
When you say prestige, what do you mean?
I mean, what's good art, what's doesn't. Now that you can find everything online. And I am developing a project about that, but now I'm in the first steps.
Okay, so are you still working with photography?
Yes, but not directly.
Okay.
The layout, the piece is not going to be a photo.
So you're actually working on a project right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, part is
Questions
going to
for
be a
Bob?
photography,
Oh, right,
and
sorry.
part that's it.
Okay.
I need a dark room actually.
You need a
So
dark
I'm looking
room.
for the
There's,
dark
they're,
room.
they're in Parkside.
Bourneville stuff.
Sorry?
Bourneville has dark room. You mean a dark room like?
Yeah, a dark room. I need a dark room, but with I need to do big pictures.
To develop?
Yeah.
Then Bourneville, and you should talk to Graham.
What's the name? Sorry.
Graham's actually based here, Graham Bradbury. He's a photography technician, but he works at Bourneville as well. It's like a sister college. But if you speak to him, you can get hold of him here. graham.bradbury@bcu.ac.uk.
He's at Bourneville on Monday and Tuesday, and he says you can just go along and use the dark rooms. He's really good. He's really good on liquid emulsion and stuff. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna work with liquid emulsion.
Oh, I do lots of liquid emulsion.
In what? In the first. In the first.
Have you done liquid emulsion?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing on stone.
Many time ago.
But the stone.
You say you do it on
stone. Yeah.
Right.
And stone.
Yeah.
I have never tried in stone.
It's very difficult.
I tried in wood and paper.
It's
maybe-
easy. Yeah.
Scissor.
Plastic doesn't work very well.
No, but you can coat it.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
just got it.
Yeah, but he's really good because he has all those sprays and everything. I'm going to go one day.
Did you read that one? It's in the Dropbox because that's it's into
What is that
to
one?
what you're saying.
Leotard
It's
something.
leotard presenting the unpresentable sublime. It's in the Dropbox.
Leotard presenting the unpresentable in the
So
sublime?
presenting the unpresentable, the sublime. It doesn't say where it's like.
Where it is
from. It's got this really good bit. Well, it's just to imagine. He's talking. So is it? Yeah, that question is to me the only one worthy life's high stakes and of the world of thought in the coming century. I'll miss the question before. So that kind of postmodernism, to the extent that it examines, you have to read it.
Okay,
It's that bit there, I thought.
Sure, could you read this?
Okay.
Yep.
I haven't got the right bit. It says what's at stake somewhere. Yes, high stakes.
So that question
It's a bit
is,
different. Oh, maybe I've pointed at the wrong thing. Sorry.
sorry,
I thought it related to what.
Okay, never mind, but that was a very interesting commercial interruption for a leotard. Okay, okay, fine. Thanks, Oscar.
Lee.
Yay, another name.
Well, I'm kind of starting out here.
Yeah.
So my second
Well, how
session,
to
but
get
Yeah, it's got.
I guess I'm still kind of trying to find my direction in terms of what I'm going to be doing here.
Are you thinking of doing a PhD?
Yeah, no, I am. Yeah. I know that it'll be around the area of kind of.
But you already sound tired and you're having a
I know. Well, I am of objects and experience somewhere around something along
Oh, so you will like some of the stuff we're going to do.
yeah. I mean, it's all related to matter. You know, idea
Yeah.
of matter.
Stay up.
Comes from London.
Both as a observer
The
of
email
things
address.
and a maker of
I've
things.
got his email address.
Did everybody hear that? I'll say it again.
What did I say?
Just make it up,
Object and experience, and the experience of objects, be they art objects, craft objects, or something. Both as a viewer, and as the experience of you as a viewer, be it sublime or whatever, and also the experience of maker and how the object is made. Two very different ways in which we have kind of connection.
So what's your background that brings you to that kind of question? What is it? What's the hunger? What brings you there?
Well, I mean, I've always my background. So I'm outside of here. I work here, but
inside here.
Inside here.
Inside here.
Inside this room.
This
Yes.
room,
Okay.
yes.
Well, outside of here, as in what I do for most of the
No,
time.
I'm not asking that. And what brought you to?
Well,
other
I mean,
than me
it was
demanding that you come here, what brought you to your projects around matter and objectivity?
Well, I think it kind of is involved in the work that I'm already doing. Really. I mean, I've always been quite quiet about putting that forward, but it's always been kind of a line of thought that I've been exploring for many years, really. And it's something that I've probably been toying with the idea of putting it into some sort of form of a PhD for maybe like 5 years, but I was always very worried about taking those ideas so far that it kind of took something away. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but no, I think the time's right.
But what I meant was, what literally is the kind of artwork you've been doing?
Literally, what
like materially.
Well, I mean, I've just spent the last 3 weeks, I had 2 days for Christmas, making work which, I mean, all the work that I do is wall based, but it's in
you say wall based?
It's wall based.
Yeah.
Generally, it's wall based, but it's in 3 dimensions. So, and all the materials that I use are designed to have kind of some sort of layering structure. There's lots of repetition, so there's kind of iteration of single points, and they're all designed to be interacted with via touch or some other method of performance, really, when you touch them.
Do you know Lewis and Helicar's work?
No.
Okay, so there's these guys called Lewis and Helicar, and they work on these wall type scenarios. If you look at their website, see what you make of them.
Okay.
Okay, great. Before you say anything, Tamsin, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Tamsin. I'm doing the MA in Fine Art part-time.
This is how it begins.
Yeah.
They all smile because they've been there.
So I was doing Johnny's contemporary philosophy last term, and it was a really good experience and very clarifying, and I found something about that clarity just really altered the way I saw things when we had to do the assignment. So we thought I'd sign up for a bit more, and then I'm coming on to this as well. In my artwork, I've got very interested in water and things to do with dissolving and disappearing and the erotic and also to do with the destruction of a surface and to make it disappear as well, and also kind of like setting up a dialogue with things from different places, putting them side by side. So I've been doing that with some of my old artwork and more recent stuff, and just sort of putting them next to each other to see what happens. I do a lot with collage and textiles.
Any questions for Tamsin? Tamsin. Yeah? Good. Okay. Now, Mattia, you can do your thing and then you can launch into...
Yes. First, another commercial interruption. Elective affinities of Goethe fits into alchemy directly.
Sorry?
The elective affinities of Goethe.
Of Goethe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a novel. It's straight into...
It's called the elective...
Affinities.
Elective... It'll be a long weekend. Can you put it on the Dropbox if you can find it? Yes?
Okay, that might be a silly suggestion. And
Because I don't think people are going to get out of bed. They're just going to do reading and watching Breaking Bad.
But also I would suggest, okay, it might be a little bit infantile, and I know I'm saying it, but there is something called Full Metal Alchemist. It's a Japanese animated series, and I know it's not maybe not the best, but it's a basic story about 2 boys who try to revive the mother by transfiguration of alchemy.
Transubstantiation.
Yeah, there's
right?
some alchemy by alchemy. They're both alchemists and they can do things, you know, change one thing into another. And they're trying to resolve, they're trying to make them out basically, because she dies and it's horrible. Trying to help it, and the story itself, but there is few, it kind of got me thinking because it's very, if you think about alchemy, they are laws to alchemy, they follow the laws of alchemy. There might not be the actual laws of what the alchemy was, but they have certain laws that they need to follow, and how
That's true of magic and voodoo and
yeah, but later, how later in the story, it actually, the laws itself are the reason to break those laws. You know, the laws itself, if you really think about them, they suggest the reason. And there's lots of time roll. There's a multiverse at one moment. There's lots of different things happening. There's one of the younger brothers basically running empty armor because he just has a soul. He doesn't have a body because he exists in our world. So that's the fact. His body is this metal armor, and he doesn't have.
it's like RoboCop too.
Yeah, and his brother sacrificed arm and leg actually to have his soul. And then, you know, there's this equality of value there. It might not be. It's a kind of. Yeah, it's a cartoon, so it's not Full Metal Alchemist, and it's, you know.
Is it a DVD?
You can watch it online, to be honest. You can find it online anywhere. But just even if you read about it, just what it is, and there's a story, you can read it on Wikipedia.
There is an episode in the series Black Mirror that is a little bit about that as well. It's like
it's called Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, BBC.
Oh yeah,
the 3 episodes. There are 3, are amazing. The 3 of them. In this one, in the future, a company can make like a robot and put the thoughts of your your dead son in it.
Oh yeah, there was a husband, wasn't there?
Yeah.
It's Charlie Brooker's.
Yeah.
And it's weird because
Light on behind you.
The wife who bought this robot get addicted to it, so she cannot throw it. It's a little bit the same, like an empty cell.
And there's a question if it's really hit.
Yeah, but in this case, it has like memories and these kind of things that are from the proper person.
There's also Black Orpheus. Anybody ever heard of this wonderful film? It was made in, I don't know, when was it made? The 70s? I thought it was earlier than that. What was it? Maybe it was the 70s. Called Black Orpheus. Very, actually when Grace comes back, she should see it as well. It's got this kind of odd occult scenario. It takes place in Brazil during the Mardi Gras, and that's all I'm going to tell you.
Oh no, it's another one. Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Oh, which one are you thinking of?
There are something else. Yes, it's a very.
It's a very hard, dark, weird thing on the occult. It's very interesting. That just made me think about it. Okay, ready? Your name is?
No, my name is Matthias. What have I been working on? Well, partially I've hijacked the last few seminars before Christmas, so it's not a mystery. I'm very much interested in the relationship between the image of art and time, or philosophy and time, as I was working on as well. And the two elements I have been looking at most recently are one is the background noise of my research, which is complexity, and particularly the notion of emergence and complexity, which, for those who are not familiar with it, is a specific form of causation where the system, by repeating itself, generates new properties that belong to the system as a whole, but don't belong to any of its elements. So the deterministic line of causation, which would expect that one could predict from the present state the next step, breaks down entirely. And there is something that is called the downward causation or a retroactive synthesis, depending on who works on it.
So downward
causation.
causation or attractive synthesis.
But
yeah.
these are all sort of very visual metaphors to describe the fact that something stays together, functions, has an economy without what would be called ground or an a priori law that can describe it, a formula that can make it happen when one applies it. So it's something that is not immanent because it is mediated, but it's mediated inside itself. The most current name for it would be surface, to relate it to something a bit.
But here's where it gets interesting, right?
Now, what I found very interesting recently is that there is a way to use Kant that links to these and offers a new platform to renegotiate this idea. Kant discusses aesthetic twice in his work. The first part is in the Critique of Pure Reason, where aesthetic is what it is taken to be in the Greek meaning of the word aesthesis, coming to the senses, coming to appearance. So,
and where does he say this?
He discusses this in the Critique of Pure Reason in the form of intuition of time and space.
Okay, just so because you have to have this.
He calls it the aesthetic, the aesthetic intuition.
Did you hear that? Did everybody get that? Okay.
So the object is the body, and obviously it reflects a Newtonian model of physics, where there can be only one object at one point in space at one moment in time. And this is the first level of interacting with the world. Then there is intellect and then reason above that. But it remains there. So the aesthetic only deals with objects, is very material. Now, in the Critique of Judgment, the aesthetic judgment is something entirely different. It's a judgment that does not judge an object, does not respond to an external or a priori concept of something. What is the beautiful? It's not a problem for Kant. There isn't a concept of the beautiful. Instead, Kant says, it is a self-referring judgment where thought judges its own state and recognizes or less an order or a sense. Now, the space between these two aesthetics to me it seemed very, very interesting because it is the same period when Kant writes this is the period where the notion of art gallery emerges. And Winkelmann, the started art criticism, wrote about this at the time. And at the same time, but not chronologically, but as a parallel concept, Rancière writes about this moment at the onset of the contemporary image of art as the aesthetic regime of art, as a regime where all the difference between different crafts that were working separately, were accepted separately, and were in function of separate scopes, painting for one thing, sculpture, architecture, 3D decoration, relief, were all understood as separate disciplines that did not exist as a whole. What existed as a whole in creativity was what happened after the inspiration of the muses, which were all things related to text, literature, oratory, poetry, music, because it's written. All of a sudden, these crafts are unified into the same regime, but as such, they're also separated, cut. There's a new perimeter of art design. The art becomes what we still more or less understand as art. It is cut apart from the rest. And I found that because of their self-reflexivity of thought that happens in the judgment, in the aesthetic judgment, there is a room for a new interpretation, or at least it might offer itself as a step to go to go further and look at art as something that cannot be theorized, cannot be defined, and therefore inscribed within a given perimeter, but remains something that is open and expands. At each new instance of art expands what art is. so far that I was really discussing with Johnny how one can think of science fiction, because one can imagine a scientific setup or a scientific distribution, which is an epistemological distribution, which doesn't exist but is thinkable. I mean, a world where gravity is lighter or there is no gravity, as Asimov once wrote about this. But one cannot have art fiction, because as soon as I imagine an art piece or an artist that would do an art piece, that in itself becomes an art piece. So you immediately expand these, the perimeter of the definition of art. So it is a definition that is never closed. And this brings us back to the grounds we've been reading about from during the autumn. Now, if it is something that is not closed, it's not defined either a priori or for good, and at the same time, as we all know very well because we are involved with it, keeps happening, we keep making things, then it is something that grows, and therefore there is an element of becoming in it which requires that the whole problem is discussed in terms of time and temporality. And this is what I am trying to now organize into more distributed chapter system.
So, but you also, if you can circle back to this question of the surface on the one hand, and this relationship of what is aesthetic as an epistemology.
Yes, this implies precisely because it is a reflexive movement, the one that Kant finds in the aesthetic judgment. I explain it again. It is a movement where thought feels itself and judges the way it is feeling itself, judging its state in feeling itself. So it is very much a feedback loop of more recent problems, more recent questions like Mandelbrot or Hofstadter. But what generally complexity theory and feedback loops either look at geometries like Mandelbrot or biological processes or cognitive sciences. What I'm trying to do is find a link or fill up the space between those disciplines that are very much not scientific but very often just scientisms, if one can use this bad expression, and a more abstract approach that is a philosophical one. And I think that it is possible to see it, because if recognizing an order as Kant judgment does is self-referential, which doesn't mean gratuitous. It means that the order belongs to this. They are analyzing the data that comes through imagination, the intuition that deals with space and time of the first critique, with thought reading that through the intellect, the category of intellect. Then there is another element that comes from complexity theory, which is somehow symmetrical to this. Complexity theory looks at systems that are in equilibrium, but in an equilibrium that is precarious, metastable is described, and therefore they are always on the edge of chaos or falling into chaos. And the various branches of science see that systems oscillate periodically, and then they have random fluctuation across them. When the two go into synchronous movement, they might go completely out of equilibrium, fall into chaos, and then eventually find another form of equilibrium later on. Now, what makes that second equilibrium that is found an order always recalls something that is positive, is because as soon as this new form of equilibrium starts its own patterns of iteration, then not only repetition but predictability enters the game. Therefore, the system becomes necessary to itself. Therefore, it becomes an order as we understand order in the current term, something that has a meaning, it's positive, it's useful, it's valuable.
And how does that make art? Because one of the things that this argument is sort of producing, which is quite phenomenal, is that you're suggesting in this that this question called art which has always been seen as something that produces an originality of some kind. It's a not, by originality in the, let's say, in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, meant it couldn't be repeated. And then with Benjamin, of course, he says, look, there is art in the age of mechanical reproduction or reproducibility or whatever the story was. But instead, but he's still talking about this original.
Yeah,
now, what's your original?
It's an original that is, it doesn't have to do, it is not only repeatable, but it doesn't have to do with the fact of being one. Actually, I would turn it inside out. I've been thinking of series of one, but the first iteration of a series, which has the possibility of iterating, even if it hasn't yet started to repeat itself. It's the first step of a pattern, or the first step of a pattern.
What's the difference between
iterability?
Yes, that and repeatability. What's the difference? When you're repeating something.
But there is a bad repetition, which is more of the same.
Right. So bad repetition.
Yes. And then there is iteration in terms of a system that, or anything, or an idea that squares itself, is applied to itself, and as such adds more to.
And the more is not geometric.
No, the more is not geometric. The more produces new properties.
It can be rough.
Oh yeah.
Rough edges, no edges.
Yeah.
That's very important.
And not only is not simply geometric and rough edges, but precisely because the iteration builds upon itself, as art builds upon itself and can constantly expand and reach new, add new dimensions. It is a step forward, I would say, or a step away from that notion of surface or simulacrum or spectre that we have sort of carried along from the postmoderns, which somehow always has a negative echo attached to it. It's always lacking something. And if it isn't lacking something, it is defined as a negative reference of what it is not, starting with postmodern. It can't even have a name by itself. It has to be related to the previous position. While something that grows out of its own iterations and has this retroactive synthesis movement where new properties emerge because of the iteration and only belong to the latest stage and were not predictable beforehand, is a form of coherence that is entirely without lack, although it does not have a foundation as the ground we were discussing.
So it's entirely without a lack, but at the same time, it's entirely, or could entirely be without a body.
Yes, if we think of a body as something that is separated from the image and from the soul. But otherwise, it is a body
and the soul?
Or a soul, or an essence, or a,
okay.
In terms of, already if we think of a surface as not needing a body, I believe we're still somehow playing along the same lines of a paradigm that wants, or that requires or projects an image and an object, or a surface on the ground. While in this instance we only have sets of dimensions that interact and therefore create a sense or a logic of their own, which can be body or image or I find it very delicate each time these terms come in, because it needs to be clarified how one is using them. There is, I see a risk. We have adopted the metaphor surface, but it's important not to think of it as something that is just physically floating above something else. It is because, as we discussed extensively before Christmas, the third dimension that cuts the perimeter out of it and permits a view from outside is no longer there. So one only deals with expanse and no longer depth.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Just make sure people can hear or have heard some of this. I put the little board down because it said something like, where is Barnett Newman, or so it was some sort of thing. And John Wigley was very funny. He goes, that question has been asked for about 40 years. Yes, it's still being asked. Anyway, but for those of you that weren't at the seminar the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks before we closed for Christmas, we got into this sort of mad discussion about dimensions, first dimension, second dimension, third dimension. I kept saying, what do you really understand by a dimension? What is first dimension? What is second? How do you visualize it? And then we got into some series of mad mathematical equations and so on and so forth. Now, what are you hearing so far of what Matthias said?
I was thinking about the, in the analytical sublime,
you're going to shout because
in the
there's
analytical sublime, he uses the term categorical, and which I think is actually in Kant, isn't it, in that particular judgment, but I've lost the reference to it. But that's when you say this sort of the self-reflexivity sort of aspect. So it seems to me that, and the notion of event really is what you're talking about, which is that is what for me the Leotard is sort of
I'm so annoyed. It's the event.
and that's what he's sort of following through. So I mean that's the key
Yes,
aspect.
it's absolutely right. You're right.
And then he's in this one of Kant is like I mean in the dynamical sublime Kant's talking about the unpresentable, but there's sort of he uses the word non-demonstrable. Can I read that quote?
I don't know. Is it the right quote? It depends.
He's referring to like what's at stake. So he's saying like for
this is the what's at stake quote.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
But in terms of this sort of, I'm trying to link this now to this notion of event. But so his own artists like if the key thing is not to be stripped of their responsibility to the question of the undemonstrative. Yeah, that's the one.
I think everyone should take a go at the word.
The question is, to me, the only one worthy of the high stakes, of life's high stakes, and of the world of thought, blah blah blah. But then he goes on to links this to sort of the question of honour in relation to the artist. But I suppose I'm sort of this sort of. I mean, this is kind of like unpredictability. Aspect. It all relates to sort of whether it's. Are we talking? Well, it seems like it's the important thing here is like getting to a radical difference as opposed to just sort of the bare repetition. But when you're still talking about systems, it's not enough open system or groundless system. I think you're still caught in the axiomatic method somehow then, and as opposed to this undemonstrable, as opposed to sort of bearing witness to this undemonstrable, which I think is what he's doing. He's taking, he's moving that move from Heidegger, where he's saying the notion of forgotten, it relates to that. So it relates to it. There's this sort of funny move going.
That's interesting. So let's start again. So one of the critiques that you've put forward is that this whole notion of the surface, which we started off with last semester, let's say, thinking that if you have a structure, again the famous table, and I said paint the surface of the table, what would you paint? Would you just paint the top, or would you paint everything that was facing air?
Everything that had a surface.
Everything that sort of had some sort of moment of presence to air, let's say. So whatever touched air would be considered the surface. If I then took a knife and shaved off everything that had this relationship to the air and threw it somewhere, that would no longer be a surface. And now whatever was underneath that, as it were, could rise up and now would become the surface. So in a sort of classic sense of surface, a surface is that which is part of the structure but isn't the structure. So that's where this all comes from. So the surface of something, now there's a lot of very long trajectory, we won't repeat all of it, but Heidegger begins to develop this scenario around the surface by talking about discourses. And, well, he doesn't call it a discourse at that moment. He has the relationship between Dasein and being, or little b being and big being, and that relationship creates this, let's say, not just a feedback loop, but it creates a elasticity around which that's like a field, and that field has not so much edges, but has, let's say, an entry point and another point. So this and the other, this and design, and that creates this thing that you could call a surface that doesn't have anything underneath it, anything on top of it, doesn't have anything. It just has this thing that is connected. With Einstein, we have the a slightly different move that goes on, well, a radically different move, because what he ends up doing is in his equation of, you know, I'm using this example, he doesn't just do it in E equals MC squared, but in E equals MC squared, where you have E and MC squared stuck together, he's making an argument that relativity creates the surface. There is no structure. There's never been a structure. It just holds, it just becomes cohesive. And what I hear you saying is a further critique of that position, because then we went into this whole thing around groundless grounds, and that you don't have the surface, and you do have the surface, and well, why do we care about a surface anyway? And part of that is because this thing that creates a cohesion allows for some form of meaning, some form of sense to start to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and what I hear your position, what's very unique, what's unique about what you're saying, and also, you know, an original contribution to the field, which is critical in how you're presenting it, is that you're suggesting that by looking at complexity and seeing how these different algorithmic feedback moments work, and paralleling it with the Kantian move, as I understood you to say it, this thing called art is something that creates the ability to make an iteration occur that is not this geometric iteration, but is something that itself is like a prime number.
Yes.
And where the prime number is itself. It's not something.
It's not describable.
It's not
being
describable.
used to anything else. Yes, and that's something that somehow is what I had in mind when I started studying for all this adventure. That art is not representing anything, and actually I would flatten even more the process. The whole reason of art. The object of art is a result or a byproduct of the fact that one wants to work. There are endless the lines that would divide who's an artist, who's not an artist, according to whatever school one is coming from. I would put it on those who enjoy making it, whatever that is, are artists. Those who do it for another reason are not. Because they're not, whatever it is that.
So there's some form of jouissance, or
yes,
whatever you want to call
and
it.
that threshold beyond which there is nothing, that there's no beyond, is this threshold which constantly assembles and organizes our life, the word sense. And from that, you know, every time something comes together and remains together, then you have something, an artist or a society.
But okay, we go back to the famous, you know, we've
Yes,
only looked at this like
absolutely.
50 million
This
times now.
discussion, this was
Presented. This is
no, or the painting over there, or the works, and that's precisely
what makes this or not makes this. This has become a very challenging piece of concrete. It's divided the room. Most people have been very polite about it. There's another whole group that absolutely say this is not art and can never be art. And it's just a travesty of using materials. Other people will say anything can be art, including this can of Coke or whatever. Now, what is it about what you were saying that helps or doesn't help in this discussion, or does it?
well.
I mean, if the artist who made this enjoyed making it, is that what you're saying?
They seem to not enjoy making it. It becomes or sounds very simplistic. It isn't that level of skill in time, and therefore.
No, you might be enjoying yourself.
But there is an element of being there with the material, being there with the ideas one is working with, whichever material one has, and it doesn't have a matter material. My work is very much ephemeral, and yet my materials has been the image of art for quite a while, so it was something tangible. But enjoying spending time with it is, to me, is the thing, is the it. Is the making of art, is the art
So if you enjoy spending time reading Leibniz?
No, because it is not. There must be. That's why.
There must be an object somehow.
No, that's why Kant features so importantly in it, and the problems of emergence. One, there should not be a separation. The object or the material is not separated from it, as in I can control it. I am part of the same equilibrium or disequilibrium. There is no external observer to a system. In science, for Kant, obviously, there is no possibility to reach reality in itself, one of them as mediations to intuitions and intellectual reason. So the same epistemological problem returns with art, and that's the point I'm trying to make with the.
And what is that epistemological problem?
Is that aesthetic is, and it cannot be taken apart from epistemology. It is one, while working, the problem is of making a distribution, or making sense. Making art and making sense are two sides of the same thing, or actually better than two sides of the same coin, overlap on the same tangent point on the horizon of the present.
Any questions on it so far?
Can I just
Yeah, sorry, I thought you.
These part though has obviously would call for a different thesis coming from psychoanalysis that the joint
Yes.
they're making, and I'm not looking at all of these. This is why it is, and it would be, this might sound a bit confusing because this is an intuition I have upstream, comes from my experience in working, but I am not looking at the problem in these terms.
Right.
What I am interested in finding is how, in regimes of emergence, which not as emerging like bell going off the fire alarm, but emerging systems, as I explained earlier, aesthetic and epistemology coincide, because the order is made in the process.
So does that mean that you are suggesting a kind of Platonic move, where there's a category called, let's say, art?
No, precisely the opposite.
Okay, can you explain that?
I once had a long discussions with Natalie Marcos there about this. There is, as long as there were disciplines or craft or material recognized as artistic material, it was rather easy to say what was art and what wasn't art. Sculpture is an art, or painting is art. But even now, it must have happened to anybody. You say you're an artist, and the other person replies, "What do? You paint." How many times has happened to and probably none of us paint. So there was this element of
Alberto paints, but he's not here.
Identifying the name or the practice with some specific ways of operating.
Yeah, technique or something.
Techniques. Obviously, since the beginning of the 20th century, this has exploded. Everything can be called art, rather than become art. So
why isn't this art?
Because what then makes it work is what gives it status. Somehow this might actually answer Oscar's question about now that the museum gallery or institution are so inflated that there is no more big monument to look at. Well, if it can be implemented, that would be then my personal line for explaining it. What can be implemented? What can enter a pattern of repetition? So can generate more questions, can stimulate more. What can enter semantic economy in the broadest sense.
So this creates a closure. This piece is what it is, by which you mean it ends itself.
Yes,
and that's why it's not working as a piece of art.
Well, I don't have such a negative point of view on these one. I just see
let's use this one
as a very small.
But this thing you are telling
no,
is very.
That is just part of something else. That is just I've got one of those downstairs in my office, and it's a piece of work that was
part of a bigger piece of work,
and it's been disseminated by the artist. And whilst I think I understand what you're saying.
I'm not criticising this.
No,
but
no,
it
no,
was
no,
a
no.
practical other people, I
It's
just
not
find
about that, but I also think that art is about intent and how you intend some set of materials to be. And it's that decision making.
But you intend in the same way with concrete, with video, with installation, or you intend along the lines of the object or the material or the mode of operation you are addressing the intention.
Okay, well, yes?
Oh,
Yeah, you breathe.
I have two thoughts.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about something folding upon itself and multiplying itself by its own
Self.
Is that right? That's right, isn't it? And that's the repetition you were mentioning. I kind of thought about translation, about my topic translation, as in when Benjamin, he talks about pure language, which it's not, I don't want to go there to be honest, but he talks about translation as a thing that multiplies the meaning of the thing and the meaning of the language. It makes it bigger, expands it. Because every time you translate it to something else, you attach to it, the other things come with it, and they come back to the original, and they feed again, and
Which is why translation can never be literal.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because if you translate it exactly the same, that's a bad translation. That's basically.
Well, it falls into nonsense.
Yeah. So, and he talks about that, and I kind of understood what you were saying through that motion. I'm not talking about the pure language because I'm not really sure exactly what the pure language is yet, and what he means by pure language, because it sounds like a pure form. I read this theory about the pure form in that. It's just too much of this idea, and we are trying to get that. I'm not really sure if that's that. But I kind of I had a quote here.
Can people see in the light? Is it too dark?
Oh no, I can see. I think I can see that. Which no single language can attain by itself, but which is realized only by the totality of the intentions supplementing each other's pure language. So he talks about this repetition, which is important, and I kind of find, I think, in this process of repeating, doing it and grabbing, like that is a kind of, I think that there's what we think of art is something, it hides somewhere there maybe. But also you mentioned when you were talking about it's not this idea, and I'm kind of working with this thought of how concept material works, how those operate, and I know concept can be material, I know that material can be a concept, I understand all that, but it still somehow seems to be, when you were talking, and that's what makes sense a little bit to me more, when you were saying that what you're doing with the material while you're making sense, making art, from something, or you basically, it all becomes one that comes back and folds itself and works again and again and again and again. And I think in this againness, that is not equally repetition. It's not one. It's one that becomes bigger, one that becomes again. I don't know how to say it.
One and
bigger.
the other.
Yeah, it's big. It's what if you. It's basically like what Halim says. It's you write one, and then you write one on top of the one, and you write one on top of the one, and it becomes the layered one, and it's all one on this. Like I'm using one. Sorry. But that's what happens. They kind of you write one, and you write one, and you write one, and you write one, and you kind of.
So is that not possible then to say in the translation what you might be suggesting here, that a singularity, which is what I think you're talking about here, has dynamic properties to it?
Yeah,
so that's interesting, because if it doesn't have any underside or any outside or any other side, and at the same time, it's able to be dynamic. It's able to create an iteration. That,
it's an action-based.
that dynamic moment seems to me what you're talking about with respect to this epistemological move around art that you're suggesting.
Yes. So I just found this question very interesting about that, please. Yes, but since we were referring to Benjamin, in the other big essay, what this is in that book already,
In the reproduction.
in the reproduction, the most important point that he makes, the most important point for us in 2013, that was written in the mid-30s last century, is that he says it would make absolutely no sense to say that, as somebody did regarding cinema, that the greatest master of cinema, as in the greatest master of painting, ever get involved. Because cinema works in an entirely different way than painting, therefore there will not be the same figure of artist working in that new medium as one did with the previous medium. So that means to me, at least, what I take from it, is that a material or an instrument, in the case of photography and cinema, is a set of dimensions. And those, for an instrument, is never neutral, is never an empty vehicle that carries a meaning. But that set of dimensions permits certain kinds of repetition, not any kind of repetition. And for one can do some things with one thing and some things with another thing.
Right, so you have a hard line in your thesis, which is that there's directionality. Did you say there's a non-reversibility?
Yes, there is an irreversibility, but irreversibility means precisely that there is no absolute language somewhere outside that would permit a translation between carving stone and walking on land. There isn't. They might overlap, they might crash into each other, there might be a way that they resonate and one can find, yes, but there is no way of an absolute translation.
So what's the advantage of moving away from, let's say, surface and onto this thing called dimension? And not to mention, what is dimension? We're not going to open that can of worms. Let's just pretend we know what dimension is for the time being.
But to me is that, if we speak about dimensionality, I would push it rather than just dimension.
Why?
Dimensionality. But
Why is that adjective?
Because it means that dimensions are numbered. One can count dimensions. And we can say that cinema or digital has got different dimensions than painting, yes. But if we think of dimensionality, it's a field or a system or a form of cohesiveness that so therefore it's one, is a singularity before it can be broken down into these many dimensions that are going in these many directions. So it is what I'm trying to do, and I'm not entirely there yet, is turning inside out how sense stays together.
How sense stays together.
Yeah. And instead of thinking that sense is sense of something, or that the sense carries meaning or represents something, or can be assembled through different elements that exist, or pure or a priori or originary or technological, whatever they can be. First, there is the thing that stay together, that is, and then one can analyze it and talk about it endlessly. First, there is the is, and that to me is what art is in my experience. That's why I'm so keen on finding a way to describe, to defend this way of phenomenon.
So to defend that presence exists.
Yes, and now exists in its own right and doesn't have to be
mediated
or justified. It is mediated, but it's mediated from inside out rather than from outside in.
Questions on this? It's very complex.
So it's not that it gains the body, but becomes the body in a way.
Yes, this is why
No, when it's being mediated, you're saying that's when it gains the body.
Not, it becomes a body, not gains the body.
Okay,
so
when it's mediated, it becomes body.
Becomes body.
Right. Okay, and
so
what Mattia's saying is,
it's not that it you put, like say we put body on it, it becomes game, like I don't know how to say it. It itself becomes a body.
Yeah, yeah.
By body you mean
And body
material,
as in materials, yeah.
like matter.
Yeah, matter.
But it's
that's
sensuous
body,
matter.
Like, yeah, it's a
Sensuous
brief,
matter, but also
whatever, it's not-
also the fact that
not
it
actually a body.
becomes a matter that is meaningful, that is intense, that has an energy. It's not just that it becomes matter like this, you put it there and remains there. Is a meaningful matter.
But going back to the fist in the concrete, let's say that's an ingredient as opposed to its own piece. Would you say that an ingredient is like you started off your discussion by talking about a set where the elements within the set didn't have their own positionality, but had the positionality of the whole set, as it were.
Yes, okay.
So you can't really extract something from.
But you can and you can't. It depends on where you position yourself as an observer or as a participant to it. Each element, this is why it becomes interesting to think of the periodic table. Each element in itself can be broken down into a previous form of coherence, and then again, and then again, and then again.
But it's not called an ingredient; it's called an element.
It's called an element because in the case of alchemy, since we are using that, there was the idea of reaching some fundamental elements. But if we think of those fundamental elements as vector or directions or lines of discourses that are co-present in the present, I always, since we were speaking about dimensions, we got 3 dimensions of space, one of time, but then no instance is given outside capital, and no instance is given outside desire. So those are also certainly dimensions of our present.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, already we have 6 vectors that are crossing each other, defining.
And name them again?
The 3 dimensions of space, so height, width, and depth, time, capital, and desire.
What about volume?
But volume comes up, or volume as in sound volume.
7.
Yeah, 7.
Okay.
So immediately, and one can break down capital in various forms. One can analyze design in all the forms of Freud.
But if you get back to Grace's the hidden mother carpet scenarios, if you see the ones that are in sort of the archival examples, they really don't look like art in the sense that it does look slightly mad in the sense that you see this child sitting on this carpet, which turns out to be the mother, and sometimes you can even see the knees and whatever. But when you were doing the pieces, and so when you are covered in the carpet and you have your different things on, it moves away from being both jokey it plays with that a little bit, but it moves away from that, and it stops being just, I don't know, some sort of weird function of how to make the child stop crying, and somehow starts investing itself with art. Have you noticed that about those pieces?
Yeah, I think it's because it's also, when I was making it wasn't just referencing those images as in a recreation of them and the function that they had, which you said quite rightly was just a practicality of holding a child still. It's more, I always viewed them as a site for vanishing, and that's how it kind of brought in this idea of being hidden. And I think that's where, not a serious element, but it moved away from the fact that they were quite comical in some senses.
But it's what I was trying to get at here, following Matthias's argument, is that it's an element, not an ingredient.
Yeah.
And that, just to sort of wrap us into this periodic table that we're trying to slightly get involved with, think about how the work takes on element and not atom or nanoparticle or something. There's something different about an element than an ingredient, than a functionality. This element thing that you say can then be recombined or recursively invested so that it can create a vector or can create some kind of dimensionality. adds to this thing that is going to allow the sensual, the sexual to come into it, and that's going to somehow have, we haven't yet, there's too big a jump now. You know, suddenly the sexual just comes sliding in, you know. But there's something in this that I want you to start thinking about how that matters to the making of art.
There is the short essay of Foucault on Magritte's painting, This Is Not a Pie.
Yeah,
Which I think is,
and there's the pillow.
okay, let's start.
It's a brilliant
No,
book.
This is the an image of the painting.
Yeah.
Image of the pipe, and then sentence, this is not a pipe. And it plays on the image, obviously, is not a pipe. But if we didn't have the text, this would stand for the pipe, and we would say this is a pipe. By saying this is not a pipe, we break these, or put these in crisis already. And Foucault plays a lot, describes how these vicious circle and goes in, and the text breaks the plane of the painting, the plane of the image, because points through it at a supposed dimension, object in the third dimension. But at the same time, the text is one-dimensional or bidimensional in its own way. So there is what makes the work particularly strong and functioning is that it keeps going around. Which are the dimensions of these? Are the two dimensions of the painting, the two dimensions of the image and the object, or the three dimensions that the text tries to add to the image but can't, because it keeps bringing it back to the flat one dimension of text.
But also he talks about the image on the easel.
And the image on the easel.
That's like the third dimension.
So it goes on, and what I think is very, very important here is that when working in art, one decides what is transparent and what is opaque. In other words, at least this is.
So you said those are two elemental aspects of.
So one can decide where something or what is an element. It doesn't matter if in other instances that element, that solid bit, can be taken apart in millions more times. This is why I was saying that, like, for me, the image of art is my material. I mean, the image of art, if one opens it up, is immense. But I work with that, and my figure as the figure of the artist related to the image of art. So the image of art becomes flat and one element. So some things can be taken as element, and I'm always quite fascinated that one of the elements is arsenic. Not only because it's funny, it's a poison, but it's already a very complex element.
Is that going to be your element?
Why not? Yes.
Yes.
It's a very complex element versus others that are real element in chemistry. So obviously, a marking point has been set at a certain height with arsenic. And that certain height is not there before one sets arsenic as an element. So it works out in upside down or inside out better. It is marking something as an element of resistance that makes a space, so that makes one part of distribution of the table. And I think, going back, this is why I think that epistemology and aesthetics coincide in art making, or better, art making must be discussed not only as an aesthetic question, but as an epistemological question as well.
That's very good. Okay, we are at the hour. So this is fun. A little stressful, but fun. So next week we have like 50,000 things to do, and let's just try and pare it down a little bit so it's actually manageable. One is to learn the periodic table. Does anybody have a picture of the periodic, like a map of the periodic table? Do we have anybody that can give
a really good application for my iPad, which has all the whole periodic table with all the elements that you can kind of rotate around.
You touch them and they make a sound.
Well, no, they don't make a sound, but they kind of, you can rotate them and see what they look like physically.
Can you send that out?
I can't send it.
Or tell us.
But I can bring it in.
Okay, great. That's great.
That's about it.
And does anybody have an old-fashioned, you know?
It's a bit like identities.
Oh.
I don't know, I like these elements too much.
You don't like the elements.
Well, the thing is,
You don't have to be an element, you could be, something else.
There are still some empty boxes.
it can be an undiscovered element.
You could be an undiscovered.
Well, what if you said
Especially
that
that
there's
they
this
know
element
that they
and
are there,
named
they
it?
just don't discover
It's like-
it. That's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
They have empty spaces, they know they're there.
Yeah.
They just haven't discovered them yet.
Well, what's really disturbing is that Mattia pointed this out. You know that plaque that's outside the door on the deaths of all these people? There's an empty space. So there's the space of World War I, the Great War of everybody dying. Then there's World War II, and then there's a space for
Well,
another.
that's what I think, thinking of this periodic table. It's like when they get new things get added to it, it's like a radical difference. But then,
Okay, so without getting depressed about this, we're still going to look at the elements. Okay, I know that it's a setting, but we're going to try and take a look at it. And we're going to. Shall we start with Leibniz, or shall we also bring in a little bit of the Kant? Leibniz? Okay, so we're going to do those 2 essays on Leibniz. That'll be the basic way in. And I'll start off with a discussion, and then we can just jump in. We'll just try and see how that goes. Right? Sound good? And what are you to read and watch for the next 4 sessions? Oh, very, very good. We've got the periodic table. Okay, thank you. So 4 sessions of Breaking Bad. And 4 seasons, rather, not 4 sessions. Which is, I think there's 12, or maybe there's 13 episodes. Yeah, 13 per season. Each one is 48 minutes long, somewhere in there.
50 hours.
You can watch it while you are reading.
That's true,
Yeah, you can put your headphones on, Good, see you next week, thanks. Sophie, I need to, you need to put your application in for the PhD.
I've done that.
Oh, have you?
I sent it to you.
You sent it to me, but did you send it to Yan Yan? But it doesn't count until it goes actually to the person who needs to do the application.
No, I sent it to the